In this section, I will demonstrate how to use the MySQL command line interface. To start, I will open up our help documentation. And from here, we can look at MySQL programs, MySQL client programs, and the first one to come back is the MySQL command line. So to note, with the MySQL command line, what this will allow us to do is to log in to our MySQL database, and from there we can issue commands similar to what we would be issuing from the MySQL workbench, such as use database, show tables, and run select queries. In addition, we can also pass in a number of parameters to the MySQL command line, such as your username and password. And we also have options there to execute a SQL script and output the results to a given file. Also, from the MySQL help, you can see a complete list of options that you can pass in. And from each of these, you can also select on, and it will give you additional details about what you can pass to the MySQL command line. So let's open up our command prompt. So within our production script query directory, to get started, we can type in MySQL, and as we have set MySQL to be a Windows variable, this command will be executable from anywhere within our command line. So we can go ahead first and log in. And for password, we can hit return and we will be prompted for our password. Or if you want, you can also just type in your password after -p without any spaces. From here, you can type in, as you saw earlier, help to give you a list of functions. So we can see here, for example, we can use database. To identify a list of databases, we can look at the show command, and if you can't remember function works, you can type in help and show. And we can see a full listing here of what we can show against. So for example, I want to show a list of databases. And similarly, I may also want to look at later, show create for a table. So from here, I can say show databases. And we can see our full list of databases, including the Sakula and sales database. If I want to change to the Sakula database, I can issue the command use Sakula. And I can issue another command, show tables. And from here, I can run SQL statements as well, such as I might want to look at how many customers we have in our customer table. So I can say select and call this cust count from customer. And we can see show create and show create table. So if I wanted to look at the full command, so from here I will look at show create table customer. And I can format that with a \G to display each field name on a given row. And we can get the full output statement or DDL for our customer table. Moving on, we can change over to our sales database. Again, issue the command show tables. And within cust pay total, I will look to display the columns. So I'll do a show create table cust pay total. And format that correctly. \g. And for example, we might want to run a query on this table to look at select sum payment total from cus pay total, where year equals 2005. I have payment year. And we can see our value there. We can also issue commands such as a status command if we wanted to look at the overall status. So we can see our connection ID 139, our unique connection ID as we are logged in at the moment. And we can also see additional details such as the TCP port is on 3306, the database is in UTF-8 MB4, and we're connected via localhost with the root user. So that's a quick demonstration of the MySQL command line. In the event that you don't have access to MySQL Workbench, you can still go ahead and run commands from the command line. But obviously if you have larger queries, this may present a challenge as the command line doesn't really support for executing large queries. Even though we could copy and paste from a notepad file out, the better option will be to actually have MySQL read our SQL file and run the file for us. Coming out of SQL, we can type exit or quit. So from here, if I wanted to run a command, I also have the option to run it outside the MySQL shell and bring it back directly in our DOS window. So I can do this by saying MySQL sales for our sales database, -u user root, -p, and I'll be prompted for the password, and this time -e, which will allow us to execute a command within a given set of double quotes. So I can say select count star as row count from cus pay total. I go ahead and execute that. And we get back our answer, row count is 2,838. If I look at our directory, we can see we have our sales project production.sql. So from here I can say MySQL, and as our sales project production script has a use statement in it, we don't have to specify that we want to connect specifically into the sales database. But I can say -u root -p, and this time we will use our directional arrow to say that we are going to direct towards our command our given file, sales project production.sql. Now if I was to run this, the output of 2,838 rows would come back to the screen and will take a minute or two to run. But obviously we don't want our results coming back to the screen. I will go ahead and redirect, and we can redirect and simply say into our results folder, and from there I have a file called cuspaytotal. I'll go ahead and just delete this file so we can see it being created. And I can select on return, provide the password, and that's our script run. So we can now come back in and see that our script is run with our timestamp 737. I can edit that and we can see the full contents of our table has been output 2839. Next, we also have the option to use a configuration file against our script, and this can be useful if we want to password protect and not have a user enter in their details from the command line. So from here we could have our MySQL jeff.cfg file. And within this file, we simply have client details of our username and password that we use to connect to our database. And from this, you could obviously store this file in a safe area within Windows and have it protected. So from here, to use our configuration file, we use the option defaults file, and we can pass in MySQL CFG. So this time, if I go ahead and execute, just make sure our results file is deleted. And if the file wasn't deleted, it would simply overwrite. So this time, when we've executed, we've not been prompted, and you can see our file has been created. And lastly, if we wanted to schedule our file to run with the Windows scheduler, we can specify within a bat file within Windows details to run against our MySQL script. We can set a number of parameters such as our SQL script, our config file, our results directory, and our date time, which will give us a format of year, month, date from the Windows date function, and a resulting file which will come out as custpaytotal with our date time and .txt on the end. When running this, we will change directory into our query, and from here we can issue our MySQL command, followed by our default file prompt, and pass in our parameters. So while you don't need to necessarily know all the details of how to batch program, this can be a very useful way for setting up your queries to run using the Windows scheduler. And to run our query, we can just run the bat, and we can see our file has been recreated here in the folder. The final step to automate our script, we can open up Task Scheduler, and I will go ahead and create a new folder and call this MySQL Queries. And from here we can do a create basic task. We will call this cus pay total weekly, and we'll just put in a comment to say run customer payment total SQL script on a weekly basis. Click next. We're given the option to ask for weekly or daily or monthly. We can say recur every week on a Sunday. Start the program, send an email, display a message. So these have been deprecated obviously. And we can start the program. We can navigate to query.bat, which will run this. We don't need to pass any arguments. And we can click finish. Once again, if we want to test that the scheduler is running, we can delete our file and click on run. And we can see we have an operation code of 2 informing us that has run successfully. We can check our output folder and we can see that our file has been created. That concludes this section on how to use the MySQL command line. While using the Windows scheduler can be useful for personal development and scheduling your own queries to run on a weekly basis, in much larger scale production environments, database administrators will have more complex tools which will allow them to check the statuses of queries and how they are running. For example, if a query has not completed, for example, large-scale production schedulers would also have the ability to set dependencies on scripts, such as a script will not run unless a number of other scripts have completed first. In very large production environments, we can have well over 1,000 jobs running on a weekend batch. So it is important that all jobs finish with a success. And if any of these jobs fail, then we don't want the rest of the batch continuing to process, as it won't have taken into account all the jobs that are required for that job. So if you have a number of jobs that are required to run in production, I would suggest that you consult with your database administration team to see how to go about setting up those jobs for production. But if you are just looking to run a quick job over the weekend that might take a number of hours and you want to walk away from your computer, then you can use the Windows scheduler, such as I've demonstrated here, using a batch file to run your query. So when you come back in on a Monday morning, your job should be ready for you. This can be very useful if you just want to test a production script before actually sending it up to your database administration team. That's all for this section, and I'll see you in the next section.